Welcome to the third, I guess it's a semi-annual. Sometimes I get biannual and semi-annual mixed up. But I believe it's semi-annual School Safety Summit for Madison County. We're happy to be here again. And I know it's hard to see from up there, but from down here, the number of people we have here is very impressive. The room is impressive from this angle, and to have this many educators and law enforcement in one place once again, it shows that you appreciate what we're doing, you're finding value in what we're doing, and I hope that continues, because that's my goal here. Because we're dealing with a very serious topic. We've got some major leaguers today here. Not that they're all, you all are major leaguers. And that's why it takes a while. I omit the introductions because it would take us an hour just to introduce all the important people in this room. But thank you for allowing me to skip that part and get right to it. So, like I said, today we have some major leaguers here today. They're going to inform us on issues that we've, real world issues that have happened here in Madison County just recently. And has been my goal since I started this summit. I want to provide a forum where educators and law enforcement can get together to discuss school safety in a manner that learns from the past and protects our future. Since we last met, we had a incident here in Madison County. And thankfully it was a false alarm, but we were able to learn from it. And the lessons that we can take from that, that we can share, we try to share those with each other so that all of our other schools can learn from them as well. As you know by now, I'm not one that's going to talk just to hear myself talk. There's much more knowledgeable folks up at this panel here than I am. And so I'm going to try to keep it brief. I'm going to ask that everyone keep it brief today because I've been handed, since I came here, since I walked into this room, I've had 3 people that told me they have to be out of here early. 3 of them were sitting on this panel, so this panel is maybe dead to you and I at the end, but that's okay. We'll stick around and answer all the questions. I do want to remind everybody we did invite the press in today, which is the first to thank the press for being here today. Our goal is to make sure that what we're doing is, at the end of the day, is doing what's best for kids and protecting kids. And I know that's in each one of your hearts, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your protection for our students, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. I hope you all leave here today with useful information to keep our Madison County students safe. So thank you for attending, and we're going to go on with State's Attorney comment.
Just depends on what you mean by early, Rob. It's all about your expectations. As educators, I think you know the importance of schedules.
The bell doesn't ring until noon.
I find it a little odd to be in this seat because I have not in the front dais, but the U.S. Marshal is sitting below us. I feel like we should switch, Marshal, to get the real heavy hitters up here. I just want to say it's great to be here. Again, Rob, thank you for organizing this. And to my mind, I want to hear what we can do is our third or fourth meeting, third. So everyone is very fruitful, and I want to hear what we can do better. My main mission is with the State's Attorney's Office to make sure that we are proactive. We are very, very swift in how we handle any report of danger to our students and our schools, and that we maintain very, very easy and smooth lines of communication. Communication with our office is key to enable us to help you in whatever you do to protect our students, because you're the tip of the spear, especially the coordination between educators, administration, and local law enforcement. So we're here to assist however we can. My phone is always on. I'm always available if you have any questions at all, because our kids are our greatest resources. So whatever we can do to enable a safer school in every part of our community, we are eager to do. So thank you all for coming. Great to be here.
Marcos.
Good morning, everyone. Marcos Polito with the Madison County Sheriff's Office. I also echo the comments that have already been made. I want to look each and every one of you in the eyes to again just tell you that how thankful we are. We all believe in networking, partnerships, as we all know, networking resources is how we help solve problems, how we help try to prevent problems, but also how we grow. Experiences are definitely a great teacher. I love these meetings because of the professionals, stakeholders, everyone that's involved, so we can either, I just love bouncing different ideas off each other. I think it's super important to do. And I think the common goal we have in here is protection. It's protection of our youth. We all know our youth is our future, and it's so important to focus on that and to help participate in anything that will help make our future, our children's future, a bright one. There are several ideas and examples that I know several area police departments have done to help network and build and strengthen relationships with our students, all the way from kindergarten through high school. And we have a variety of different ways and methods that we have tried. Some have been successful, some have areas of growth, and some are going to be new initiatives. So I'll kind of let the meeting get started, because as everyone knows, I'll continue talking to the battery and this microphone will probably go out. But we'll go ahead and move the meeting along, but as we go forward, I'll be more than happy to share some of my ideas on what that opportunity presents itself. But thank you again for everyone being here.
Yeah.
In representing the mental health board, again, we are interested in prevention, treatment, and support services to the schools. We do fund 17 different behavioral health providers, and some of them do provide school-based services, but in that we're also looking at expansion. What can we do to expand services within the school settings? And so we're looking at workforce and developing workforce with Madison County Employment and Training. I know Rob's working on that as well. Looking at education, and then looking at other trainings that we can facilitate and help within the school settings. We're looking at doing a couple of pilots this next year to see how we can advance mental health supports to each of you. Feel free to contact us at any time for any questions, concerns, issues with mental health that we might be able to collaborate, partner, or talk with you about those.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you all. So, first of all, our featured speakers, the United States Marshal Deb Davis would like to come up, and if you would come up to that microphone and just say a few words.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you all for inviting me to this important meeting. There's nothing more important these days than school safety, in my opinion. I've also brought my Chief Deputy, Jeremy Wyatt. We mainly came here today to listen to what everyone else had to say about school safety here in Madison County. Obviously, school safety is not one of the Marshal Service's core things that we do, but it's very important. So we just want to let you guys know that we are always ready to assist should something happen here in Madison County. We always have our task force people on the street there in Madison County on a daily basis. So just want to say that we're always going to be there if you need us. And like I said, it's so important these days to get together and talk about school safety. For instance, for us, obviously our thing is the security of a federal courthouse. So we train constantly on active shooter drills and what have you. So in my opinion, there's nothing more important than being trained and being ready. So once again, I thank you for inviting me to your meeting, and look forward to hearing some more about what you guys do here. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. So I appreciate the invitation to come talk about the issue of school safety. And so I'll just review a few things about where the Illinois State Police intersect with this issue. And it is at very many different points in the process and the larger ecosystem that we're talking about when it comes to school safety. The partnerships we have in this room are outstanding, looking around at many of the great leaders that we have here, representing various parts of law enforcement, our local partnerships here with local law enforcement, the Sheriff's Department, municipalities that have their police agencies represented, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, the Marshal Service, all outstanding partnerships, as well as with the state's attorney we have here in Madison County. And that is a key element of how the entire process of school safety has to work. There can't be people operating in a silo. We can't be in our own little lanes, in our own little world, pretending like this is just our area that we're going to take care of and not work with each other. That is just simply a recipe for a disaster. As we've seen in other communities around the country where things go bad when it comes to school safety, it's because you didn't have a tight web and a tight cooperation between all the various stakeholders, particularly in the world of law enforcement, working very closely together and training very closely together. And so that is a key part of what has to be the mindset as we're dealing with school safety. As far as the Illinois State Police are concerned, our missions, obviously many people are very familiar with our guys in their Montana peaks looking in their sharp uniforms, making traffic stops on the various interstates and highways and byways of the state of Illinois. But that is not really that's only a limited component of what the Illinois State Police do. We have the Division of Criminal Investigation, which is a larger and growing part of the Illinois State Police, focused on homicide investigation, sexual assault, violent crime, gun, drug, and human trafficking, the big three of trafficking that are moving around the state and affecting every community. And we also have a large responsibility and a growing responsibility when it comes to gun safety. I'm not talking just about the FOID card issue, which gets a lot of coverage, but the various red flag laws that we have in the state that do have an intersection with the school safety issue and with a authority that schools have to be able to act when they have information that is of concern about people within the school community, whether students, parents, etc., to be able to take some intervening action to prevent them from hurting themselves or hurting others. So we have something called the Clear and Present Danger Law, and every single law enforcement agency in this room, as well as the state's attorney's office, uses that clear and present danger. That is when someone has a lawful ability to have a firearm and has a firearms identification card, and for some reason they're making threats, a violent threat, a threat against themselves, homicidal, suicidal conduct that's actually homicidal or suicidal, as well as verbal communications that can be threatening. And law enforcement agencies, and every law enforcement agency in this room uses this, reports to the Illinois State Police that this individual is a clear and present danger. Now, we've made significant changes to that system in the past year, upgrades that the legislature has given us the tools to do as a result of the experience of Highland Park and other incidents of violence, and that's why I have to leave a little bit early to get up to Chicago. I've got to be in Chicago in about 4.5 hours to do an interview with another news outlet to talk about clear and present danger and firearms restraining order issue. So schools also have the ability, along with law enforcement, to report a clear and present danger. If someone is exhibiting behavior that's homicidal, suicidal, making threats to themselves or to others, we have a portal for school officials who by law are mandatory reporters. They are supposed to report that type of behavior, either a student or maybe someone that could be a teacher, could be an employee, could be a parent, could be other adults that may be involved in the situation, to report that information so that we can identify that person is now prohibited from being able to have access to a firearm. And then we can work up the ability to go intervene and obtain any firearms that they may have already legally obtained, and either temporarily or permanently dispose of them. And we're getting better and better at that as an agency, and our local law enforcement agencies are getting better at that. It's tricky work sometimes. It does require a lot of man hours. It does require a lot of working up and looking at that person's background and looking at the safety situation that they may be involved in. But since we've made those changes to the portal, law enforcement has greatly increased the number of reports they are making. We are identifying thousands of individuals who have firearms, who have a firearm purchase history of some serious firearms, and identifying them as being clear and present dangers, intervening, and then properly, either permanently or temporarily disposing of those firearms. The number of schools that are now reporting clear and present dangers has greatly increased. And we were working on this before Evolve and trying to educate school leaders to submit this information when they have it, to make a proper report when they have it, so something doesn't happen in their school like what has happened in other schools. Now that was a trickle at first, but now we're seeing a lot more school administrators, school leaders using that portal, reporting those clear and present dangers. It's doubled just in the past year, the number of reports that are going into that system. And then that creates a process where law enforcement can then be able to intervene and take some action to prevent those types of tragedies from occurring. It's just an obvious tool that exists in this state. Many other states have it. Florida has used it to great effect. It's a growing tool that we're using here in this state as well. We also have something called a firearms restraining order that has recently passed. Again, it's very similar to what other states have. It's been used to some effect, where family can then go to court and come to that building right across the street here in Madison County, and they can go and ask for a court to say, look, we see what these factors are, we see what this person's conduct is, we see how they're behaving, we see the threats that they're making, they may be saying something on social media, they may be talking about hurting themselves. All those things can be submitted to the court, and the court can make a decision using proper due process and respecting the rights of the Second Amendment, and go through that process, and again, also be able to intervene. So you have many pathways there to prevent some of these tragedies that we've seen occur in schools in particular, where people have a school shooting, and you have the ability to intervene using those two tools. And that's something, the greatest challenge we have in terms of using those very legitimate and very effective tools is awareness, getting people to know about it, use it. And law enforcement's getting a hell of a lot better about it, but we definitely want to make sure families who may have that information, that they're aware of the firearms restraining order, a tool that they have, because it's not very widely used, frankly. And as we've seen, law enforcement can do a great job and be very forward-leaning, be very thoughtful, and be very deliberate about protecting public safety and intervening to make sure those tragedies don't occur. We have a massive loss of life. But sometimes, we're not omnipresent. We don't know everything. We need the community. We need help from people in schools. We need help from people in neighborhoods and families who may have information about someone who's potentially dangerous, who may walk into a school like they did in Nashville, like walk into a school like they did in Uvalde, or, the list goes on and on and on of how many shootings we've had at schools. And that's where that tool is so important, to make sure that the public is aware of it, and they have the ability to help us to be able to protect public safety. Another challenge, as was recently experienced in this county, has been the issue of hoaxes. We know that is a very draining thing to experience for a local community, particularly for law enforcement, for the school. You are not alone. This is a national phenomenon. It's occurring in multiple jurisdictions around the state, where the Illinois State Police had to respond and assist. And we have very good, robust law enforcement, local law enforcement here in Madison County. But even here, sometimes we are asked to assist with our SWAT, with our K-9s, clearing the building, particularly if it's a large campus and a large complex, to make sure it's been secured and safe. And we're very happy to do that, and we're very closely with our local law enforcement partners to do that. We have some outstanding people in the Illinois State Police that do that work on a daily basis. But we're doing it in all kinds of places. Urban areas, suburban areas like we have in Madison County, rural areas where these fake hoaxes, these calls are called into a school, either a bomb threat or a threat of a shooting, and you can't ignore it. It's tough. You can't ignore it. You have to respond to it, because if you don't, something very terrible can happen if you ignore that. And that requires spinning up law enforcement to be able to respond. It requires a lockdown. It requires clearing the building. It requires the follow-up that our folks do at the statewide fusion center, which many of law enforcement here in this room uses, as well as our federal partners, the statewide terrorism intelligence center that's under the Illinois State Police, where we will look at all the information that we have, the phone number that maybe it came from, the email address that the online threat came from, the social media account that the threat may have come from. So these fake threats, they do happen on a regular basis. And we know that some of them are coming from overseas. So these are our foreign adversaries that just want to drive us nuts and disrupt the community and disrupt lives that we enjoy as free citizens in this country, and make it difficult for us. This could be some local knucklehead who may call in a threat just to disrupt things. It could be a student, it could be a variety of things, but it is a reoccurring phenomenon. But I will say, again, you can't ignore it, and that is the challenge. You have to respond, you have to remain vigilant. You can't get worn down by people that cry wolf all the time. So you frankly have to be ready at all times to respond and clear and make sure you're taking it seriously. And to the extent we can help in any way possible with the resources we have through STIC, through the Illinois State Police, we are here to do that. That's just a few things I wanted to touch upon and to reiterate at every forum that I can, in every public medium that I can, the importance of these tools that we have to be able to act. I know it's very easy to get on social media, when you can't sleep at night, and you start scrolling, or you turn on the news, and it's one terrible, horrible tragedy, one after the other, and you can become a bit overwhelmed and maybe have a little bit of despair and say, well, why can't we do? There's nothing we can do. Well, despair and hopelessness is not a strategy. That's not a plan. And we can do things. And men and women who serve in law enforcement are doing things every day to prevent horrible, horrible, terrible things from happening. The community can act. We are seeing, as we are implementing these tools, and as we go through the millions and millions of records that we have in this country and the various record systems that we are identifying hundreds of thousands of people. We are acting, we are intervening, we have more firearms disposition reports that are being filed than ever. We have more firearms that are being recovered from people who are, we all agree, are severely mentally ill, very dangerous people that need help, but have no business having a firearm and being able to go into a school and kill a bunch of children because of whatever underlying issue that they have. We have the ability to act, we can do it, and it just requires a team effort. We're seeing over and over again, you don't have to be hopeless. There are things we can do, and I think the men and women in this room every day are doing that job, and it just requires all of us to work together. So that's just a few issues that intersect with the Illinois State Police when it comes to school safety, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions at this time?
Yes, sir.
You referenced educators as mandated reporters.
Yeah.
So specifically, what information are we obligated to report? You were talking about FOIA cards, and so is it specifically threats that are tied to the use of firearms? Or is it threats that are tied to threat to a person's safety or safety of an individual?
So it is not all school employees, it is school administrators specifically. That's what the statute says. So how we interpret that generally is someone who's either the superintendent, principal, somebody who's in that administrative role within the school. And the description of the behavior to be reported is not necessarily tied to a FOIA card or a firearm or something like that. It's just that they are exhibiting violence or homicidal, suicidal, assaultive behavior, that's in the statute, or threats, and making verbal threats of that nature, because you may not know if they have access to the firearm. And that's the whole point of reporting. You make the report, we'll know. Because in this state, we have a process where we verify anytime someone goes through a background check to purchase a firearm, there's a history of that. We don't know the kinds of firearms and all those other things, but we know that they have that history. So we can link that report with the intelligence that we have and the information that we have to identify if in fact that is a concern. So that's why you got to report, because you don't know. You're not sure. And if they don't, then that's just reported, it's in the system. And then if they attempt to obtain a firearm or they attempt to get a FOIA card, then we'll have that report in there, and then we can make a determination if they are safe to be able to have them. What else? And that's the process that's playing out every day in schools all across the state of Illinois.
Any other questions? He's the one that has to leave early, so if you want to ask.
Bueller, anyone? All right, I'll be here for a few more minutes in case you come up with something else.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Next up, the Assistant United States Attorney, Randy Killian.
Good morning, everybody, and I want to thank you all for inviting the U.S. Attorney's Office to attend my Oh, you can. The first thing I want to do is I want to apologize for Rochelle Crow, our United States Attorney, who's unable to attend this meeting. She's out of the district with government travel. As the ATAC, the Anti-Terrorism Coordinator, and the National Security Coordinator, from the moment Rochelle Crow became U.S. Attorney, the first conversations that I had with her with regard to our threat risks in the Southern District of Illinois with schools. Since then, since she's been U.S. Attorney, most of my conversations have been about schools and threats and violence to schools. The U.S. Attorney's Office is full in to assisting both state and local law enforcement and assisting our federal law enforcement partners today to show the emphasis that we put on this. We have our law enforcement coordinator here, our public affairs officer here. We've done a show and tell. We've brought key FBI people that we work with on a daily basis. We have Nick Ponsano here, who's going to talk to you about the Guardian system. We have Special Agent Rick Box, who's going to talk to you about weapons of mass destruction. The things that we do in the office is responsive. It's great that Director Kelly was here, because the Illinois State Police and the local police, particularly here in this county, Madison County, I've been with the U.S. Attorney's Office for 33 years. I can't speak for the rest of the country. I can't speak for the law enforcement presence and the response to threats and to criminal activity. I can speak for this district, and I can tell you the Illinois State Police with Director Kelly and all of the local police here have been very responsive and meet and work on a routine basis to ensure that we're doing everything we can to protect the students in the school. One thing that U.S. Attorney Crow has asked our AUSAs to do, something that we have not routinely done in the past, and that is to do outreach to your schools. And that's something that we've done. The things that we typically talk about are the things and the trends that we see as far as threats to both students and the schools. The first thing, we have the swatting, we have threats to schools, as Director Kelly indicated. The host threats can drive law enforcement crazy. I can tell you that when the event happened in our district, it happened all over the state and all over the country, and has happened. We had it last summer, we had it this year, and Agent Box is going to talk about it. Those calls, as soon as they come in from the FBI or any law enforcement agency, our office is a 100% support. We are not the first responders. We're the people that come in later to help the local police and the Illinois State Police as best we can. The moment that happens, we start turning our assets towards if this is real. Luckily, it wasn't. But if it was, our victim witness coordinator was contacting other people in the country that could come help. Our office was notifying the Department of Justice that there was a potential issue in our district. We were monitoring the issues throughout the state and throughout the country. It is something that our office is very, very dedicated to. When we do outreach, we typically talk both that threat category, but we also talk about some other things that wasn't mentioned yet, and that is sexting, which is a very common problem in this district, and drugs. First of all, sexting. Sexting is something. I went to a school in the district. I spent all day and talked to every student in the entire high school, and we talked about, as part of it, sexting. I was surprised that in their freshman year, they got a little bit about sexting, that talked about that it is something that is real and something you should protect yourself from. The FBI has agents today. Our office have prosecutors today that are working with students in your schools that have been victimized by sexting. If you don't have educational opportunities and outline the risks, right now it's young girls, obviously, but it's also frequently, if not statistically higher, boys. And what happens is they will befriend them on the internet. They will get them to send a picture. Once they send a picture thinking they're sending it to a girl, conversely to a boy, once they do that, one of two things is going to happen, both of them horrendous. One is they're going to start asking for money. If they don't get that money from them, they're going to say, I'm going to send it to your friends. I know every friend you have. I know everybody on Facebook. I'm going to send it to your parents. This puts these kids in a terrible situation. You can Google it. There's been suicides around the country of kids that's had this issue. I strongly encourage you to look out for your kids and your students. The other way is is just as problematic, or probably more problematic, and that is the one where once the pictures start coming, they're asking for more and more and more in greater detail, and then ultimately they try to meet with the student, usually in this case girls. Unfortunately, in our Benton division and in the Southern District, in the Fairview Heights division, both have seen a number of these type of cases that we really should be making sure that the students are aware of. Drugs is the other thing, fentanyl, and I know you all know this, but I'm just going to repeat it. Fentanyl right now is a huge problem for us. The introduction of fentanyl into various substances, cocaine, methamphetamine, it's important to remember that methamphetamine, 2 milligrams will kill a person. 2 milligrams. If you take it, when I go out and talk to students, I typically take a little drink mix that you put into a water bottle. That's 15 grams. 15 grams, that little container of drink mix could kill 7,500 people. Methamphetamine mixed with cocaine, mixed with whatever, all of them were seeing fentanyl be introduced. So much so that law enforcement is even afraid sometimes to test certain drugs without using a hood because of the potential that fentanyl could be in those, mixed with those drugs. So that's another thing. In fact, Madison County, I don't have the statistics right off the top of my head. I just went to an OD justice training. In Madison County, more people die of overdoses than die of gun violence. So it's something we can't ignore as well. In fact, in the United States, 265 people die every day as a result of drug overdoses. Now, 265 days, let's think about that in terms of a commercial airplane. A commercial airplane crashes today, it's going to be on the news. It's going to be on every news. Doesn't matter if you watch Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, it's going to be the #1 thing. But we have 265 people dying, and in Madison County we have more people dying from drugs than we do of gun violence. Both of those things that we try to go out and do outreach with any partner that we can find for students in the high school level. The problem that we have as a U.S. Attorney's Office is the state prosecutors train, their offices are the front line. There's no doubt. By and large, the cases that are handled, prosecutions, the vast majority of them are going to go to our state partners, state prosecutors. The problem that we have when we identify juveniles in the threat context and the sexting context, or in the drug context, is that the federal system is not designed or run in a way that allows for easy prosecution of juveniles. We don't have a juvenile holding facility here. Our statutes are not good with regard to prosecuting juveniles. The statutes and our process is basically said we can only do it if the state is incapable or unable to handle the prosecution for whatever reason. I can tell you that the U.S. Attorney, the First Assistant, and the Criminal Chief of our office have turned or pivoted our opinion, pivoted our process for juveniles. We are now trying to assist in any way we can in prosecuting juveniles, to assist folks that are sitting in this room, assist the schools and the state law enforcement and state prosecutors. The other thing that we have as far as the problem is we've talked about threats and hoaxes. One of the problems with investigating in a guardian system, and Nick Ponzano is going to talk to you about the guardian system. With the guardian system, that is a threat process, reporting system. What it does is it alerts that there's been some type of threat in the district. FBI will immediately get that along with local partners to try to investigate it. The one thing that we have a problem with is the fact that the First Amendment and crime are very far apart. Sometimes people say things that make us concerned. You'll hear, oftentimes with a homicide or a school shooting, anything like that, you'll see that typically the person who committed the offense, that person was in fact under the watch of the FBI. That's not uncommon. We know, they know of these folks, but there's little that they can do, and maybe Nick can talk a little bit more about that. From the standpoint of our guardian approach and identifying threats to the schools, the things that we typically want to do, obviously, is to identify and then try to disrupt or mitigate the damage that a person can do, whether it be in the United States or whether it be across, as you're clearly noted, and especially in Fox, will tell you the threats that come from overseas. Again, I want to tell you, I want to offer the fact that our office, and I apologize again that Rochelle is not here. She's a much more elegant speaker, and she certainly is one that's probably briefer than I am. She covers her material very quickly. But I do want to impress upon you her interest and our entire office's interest in doing what we can to assist you all in any way that we can. I'm now going to ask Special Agent Nick Ponzano to come in and talk briefly about the guardian system, and then Special Agent Bob.
Thank you, and thank you for reminding us too that there's more to school safety than just the shooting. There's so much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for having us. We're very concerned with school safety issues at the FBI, and Rick Box, like Randy was saying, is going to talk a little bit about some of the emerging trends in swatting and hoax calls and things like that. But I'm going to talk to you guys briefly about how the FBI handles incoming complaints and threats and how we manage that with our partners and information sharing. And we do that largely through the process, through this guardian intake process that Randy touched upon. So, and that came about after 9/11. We found that there was a gap in how we were getting information from our local and state partners, and how the information was being shared that we had in our possession with our state and local partners. So the guardian process is a process that the state and locals have access to through eGuardian. We get calls through our National Threat Operations Center. Calls that are made by the public are all recorded, entered into this process. It doesn't immediately become a full investigation by the FBI. We assess the nature of the threat and where those resources need to go. So, also like Randy was talking about, when it comes to First Amendment issues, the FBI does not simply open a full investigation based upon protected First Amendment speech. You can say some very insightful things, but that does not necessarily mean that is a federal violation of crime. But it is necessarily something that we might look into or encourage our state and local partners to look into to make sure that there is no emerging or ongoing threat in the areas. So we'll receive these guardian assessments at the local level. There's 56 field offices throughout the United States, and we'll determine if it's something that is a threat to life. We'll partner with our state and locals to immediately contact them within 24 hours to share that information. Recently, we've had such things as a lot of the school threats. Some member of the public may see Snapchats, Instagrams of a student taking pictures of guns and talking about the first day of school. Often members of the public, they'll assume that the FBI is the first person they need to go to. They're not wrong necessarily, but this information will not have reached our state and local partners. So we will, in a timely fashion, contact our state and local partners and make sure that these threats are being assessed, and to see if there's an actual danger to a school. I want to emphasize that the bottom line, though, is that we are not first responders. These hoax calls, these swatting calls, they are issues that affect your schools, they affect your local resources, they affect emergency resources, they draw emergency resources away from actual emergencies. So we recognize that it is a problem. In managing whether or not to respond to these things is important. We can't say to our partners, do not respond to these things if you think it's hoax, because I think that would be a mistake. Like the U.S. Marshals, FBI agents are all trained in how to respond to active shootings. But we're not going to be the first people on the scene. The value and the benefit we provide to our state and local partners is often after the fact with the resources we have, especially if the subject of the swatting groups calls overseas or in other states. And we work with our partners at the United States Attorney's Office to prosecute those violations of federal crime. So we recognize that while this may be new and emerging, especially locally with these mass swatting events, it's not something new to us, and we have resources that we can assist you with. So I would highly encourage our law enforcement partners to reach out to us to see what resources we can provide you with. Director Kelly mentioned the statewide terrorism intelligence center. The reporting to fusion centers is very important. Like you said, information sharing is extremely important because often these calls happen in clusters. We can recognize early on that this is occurring, and we can share it throughout the state or throughout the region to make sure that we're responding appropriately to these threats and manage our responses appropriately. Again, we have a list of best practices for responding to these investigations. So for our law enforcement partners, I say, do not hesitate to reach out to us at the local FBI office, because this is something that may have occurred frequently in other areas. We've done this before, and we can provide you with other resources. My partner Red Box here is going to talk more at length about swatting groups calls. If you have any questions, I'm sure we can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
All right, good morning. You guys all hear me okay? My name is Rick Box. I'm the WD coordinator for the FBI's Springfield office, but I'm based out of Fairview Heights. WD coordinator sounds sexy, but it's actually, I don't get paid any more money. I'm just a regular agent. I am a product of the Triad School District, back when Mr. Henderson was just a teacher, not a superintendent. And my kids are a product of the Highland School District, so I have a vested interest in making sure our kids can go to school every day and feel safe in that community. WD program for the FBI, we cover seed burning, so chem, bio, rad, nuke, and explosives. But I want you to understand that a majority of our time is spent working bombing matters. So I only have the numbers from quarter 2 for this year, but we had about over 1,000 cases the FBI investigated that involved weapons of mass destruction, and 89% of those involved bombing matters. Of that 89%, 80% of those were bomb threats or swatting cases. So it is something that we deal with all day, every day, nationwide. They asked me to come speak about the incident that occurred on in mid-April, April 12th. I'm going to have to tap dance around it a little bit because it is an active investigation right now. But what I can tell you, when we originally received the information that these calls were coming out, it was SAT day. Statewide, students were taking SATs. So what's the first thing we thought? Somebody's trying to get out of their SATs, they're not prepared for it. But as soon as we reach back to FBI headquarters, that's one of the beauties of the FBI is we can do this national outreach. We can reach back to the WD directorate and figure out if this is something that's only happening locally or if it's something that we're seeing nationwide. So we reach out to the WD program and they said, yeah, this is actually sounds like it's tied to another investigation. So the first thing we did was try to obtain one copy of this incoming call for the swatting incident. Within 10 minutes of us receiving that first copy of that call, we had it to the case agent in Boston, and he was able to verify that it was in fact tied to their case. So we had over 20 calls here locally, but we tied it to an investigation that at that time had over 200 calls nationally. So quickly identified that it was tied to that case, and I can't go into too many details. The subject is overseas, they're using a VPN. We won't be receiving any additional phone calls from that subject right now. They're from a country that we can't extradite, but we're not as concerned about them making any more phone calls. So the big things about the swatting for us, I'll try to get into who, what, why, when, how, but the biggest thing is why. Everybody always asks why, what's the point? For us, mainly what we see whenever we interview these guys after the fact is they like that media attention. So they're posting, especially if they can get some national media attention or even local media attention, if they can post that video of the response that they got on the internet, on Discord, that's a win for them. So they're looking for that media attention. They also look for the law enforcement reaction. They want to see what kind of law enforcement reaction they get. There is a website called RiverBender.com that actually has live video feeds of random places around the U.S. And they tend to pick swatting incidents at places or bomb threats at places that are attached to that RiverBender.com, so they can do a live stream video of what kind of reaction they're getting from law enforcement. So that's kind of the why. Where we're seeing it on social media and Discord, that's where they're mainly posting these videos of the reaction that they're getting from law enforcement and schools. It's mainly active shooters. That our investigation started out from a bomb threat, and a guy realized he was getting more activity, more law enforcement response, and he switched to swatting. So he changed up his tactic. Instead of making a bomb threat where he's evacuating school, he wanted to see the law enforcement flood into the school. So they do kind of change their tactics as they go along, as they get more, I guess, bolder. Whenever we see it, though, it's active shooter inside the school. They're saying that they're actually inside the school. So training dispatchers is the biggest thing we can do. The FBI also has bomb threat guidance that includes swatting guidance that we can pass out to you. It's unclassified. It's not law enforcement sensitive. We can give it to your schools. It talks about things like notifying law enforcement immediately. That's a no-brainer. But communicating with your staff. That's a big thing for administrators. You've got to communicate with your staff. You need to let your staff know that we have an active situation going on. And then developing a search plan. Whenever cops come into a school, we don't know the school better than you. Your teachers know what items should be there and what items shouldn't be there, and if they see a bag or something out of place, we want them to notify law enforcement. So if we receive a bomb threat, have a search plan in mind in your school, and have teachers kind of take control of their area and figure out what belongs there and what doesn't belong there. When we train the dispatchers, the things we're looking for there is obviously what number did it come from, if there's an accent, if they can try to check the age, try to figure out what the age of the caller is, then the demeanor. If somebody is actively involved, if there's an active shooter in their school and they're calling and they're saying, hey, we have 6 people dead right now, they just got killed in front of me, and they're acting very calm while they're saying it, that's not the kind of demeanor we would expect on a 911 call. Additionally, if we don't see multiple calls coming in, if we see just one call received at a dispatch center, that's a pretty big red flag for us too, because every student nowadays has their phone with them, and we're expecting to see multiple 911 calls coming in at the same time if we do see an active shooter. No background noise. If they're saying that they're in the middle of an active shooter threat, but we don't hear any of that background noise, or most of the time we actually hear a keyboard clicking in the background because they're trying to post things online, that's a big red flag too. Unable to answer follow-up questions. In the recent ones, the dispatchers did a great job. Some of the dispatchers did a fantastic job where they got the guy talking. They asked him what school he was in. He couldn't pronounce the name of the school, couldn't pronounce the name of the street the school was on. When they asked him what classroom he was in, he was like, 75. So dispatchers doing a good job, asking the right questions, really helps. And in most cases, we'll see the subject elevate their speech too. So they might say it's an active shooter when the dispatcher kind of presses them pretty hard. You can see these individuals start to increase the threat. Okay, it's not just an active shooter, it's also a bomb now. And they kind of change their demeanor and they get more aggressive on the call. So they go from being passive to being very, very aggressive. And then the other thing we see is Fortnite or Call of Duty talk. So an example would be, we had a guy call and say, I placed 50 backpacks with 50 pounds of C4 in 50 different schools. Okay, we can tamp that down pretty quickly because the odds of somebody getting 50 pounds or 2,500 pounds of C4 and putting it in 50 different packages around 50 different schools is pretty unlikely. But like Director Kelly said, we have to take every one of these threats seriously. We do have to get the response. We have to go out there and we have to make sure that it is in fact not a credible threat. The last thing I'll say is if you do receive an online email, if you receive an email response, They're kind of rare, they're not as common as us receiving something in dispatch. But keep that email open. Keep it open so we can get that header information, we can get that information. A lot of times people will delete it, or maybe the subject will recall that email after they've got the response that they wanted. Try to keep that email up and open. Don't close your computer out because we're going to come and want to get the computer forensics out of that. Last thing I'll say is if it comes into a non-emergency line. So VoIP, if you're using a VoIP calling system, you're not able to call 911 directly into the dispatch. So a lot of times whenever we're seeing these threats, they're calling through a VoIP line to avoid detection by law enforcement, but that VoIP line will not allow them to actually call a 911 center. So if they go to a non-emergency number, again, that's a big red flag for us, and we can try to tamp it down at that point. So that's kind of how we work our swatting investigations, what we're looking for whenever we see a swatting incident. We do try to tailor our response to that. Like Nick said, I hope nobody expects the FBI to be the first people on scene. The only way we're ever going to be the first person on scene is if we're at the school talking, or if we happen to be driving by and our burn alert goes off and lets us know that there's an active shooter at the school. Otherwise, we'll probably be the last to respond, but the first to take credit for it. Are there any questions about that? Yeah.
Curious how you guys receive notifications. Is that through stick, or is there a better way to communicate that? When those swatting calls come in, obviously everybody's scrambling. One of the first calls we make is to Fusion Center.
Yeah, so the
Where do
stick
you
is
guys-
one of our best resources. The question was how do we receive notification? The stick is probably our best resource. We have a dedicated FBI intelligence analyst that is at the stick, and if they do receive any information, they will pass it along to us. The swatting incident in April is a great example of that. The stick was collecting all the information while we were trying to identify where the calls were coming from, and we partnered up with them. It's a great collaboration. We also would love to receive those calls directly to the office, to the local office. We have scanners going to try to listen to that. It didn't go out on this burn early, but we do actively listen to a scanner to see if there's any other threats.
That's what I was curious about. You had mentioned getting that phone call pretty quick, which would be helpful. Obviously, we can get those calls pretty quick, but obviously we're a small town, so we've got people going to the school. We've got investigators that are trying to look into that. We got dispatchers that are like octopuses up there anyway. So I'm just looking to streamline what is the best way for us to get that recording. Can we send that recording to stick? They would then turn that over to you, or is there a different way to do
Yeah,
it?
please send it to the stick and they'll filter it to us immediately. Or you don't, one single point that you guys can all have one number, 1-877-ILL-STIC.
Sticks have got sent to us, by the way.
Okay, they're great. Great entity, great asset that we have a very long.
Yes.
I know the carriers have been going through a process of authenticating calls within the United States, but I heard they're also working on authenticating those calls overseas. So are close to getting it done?
Yes and no. For landlines and cell phone numbers, yes, but for VoIP calls, we're not seeing any, we're not making any headway with that.
So FOIA is
VoIP's our biggest issue with VPNs. We can still work our investigation, work our way around it, but it does take us a little longer. Any other questions?
Any questions for any of our panelists? Anything at this time? Again, I apologize for the somber tone, but it is a serious event, and I appreciate everyone here taking the time out of their day and taking the time to take this seriously, because it affects all of us. It really doesn't. Somebody mentioned that the students are our most valuable resource. So, if that's it, I know you may maybe get out of time. If there's any other questions? Thank you guys very much for attending today. We should appreciate your time. Thank you.